All right, awesome. So, welcome everyone to our webinar with Anne Salazar and me, Marie Baez, where we will be talking about herbal medicine and ways of helping your family with herbal medicine, and dispelling, any fears you have about that, educating you about some things, and then showing. At the end, we will give some offerings of things and resources that we have for you guys um, to use in the future. So I would like to introduce Anne Salazar. And Anne, go ahead and just introduce yourself and say what your background is, what you specialize in, what you're passionate about.
Okay, Ann Salazar. I'm a registered professional member of the American Herbalist Guild. I've been a clinical herbalist for 25 plus, almost 30 years. I've worked with families, I teach a lot, do herb walks, things like that. I work a lot with children and families. I work with fertility. Those are all my passions, the family stuff and the
Mhm.
raising of babies and the making of babies and women's health, but men's health too, obviously, very important too.
Agreed.
I've taught midwives how to work with herbal medicine, and I love doing that. And yeah, those are my passions, and that's my practice. I work a lot in conjunction with pharmacies too, so I have a lot of traction with the other side of the medicine field. So it's
Yeah,
very important to
awesome.
myself and my
We're
patients.
going to be talking about in a little bit the differences between herbal medicine and natural medicine and pharma, and kind of to help people understand when to use what as well. And my name is Marie Baez. I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist. I've been that for about 12 years now. And I specialize in perinatal work, prenatal, postpartum, women's health, stress in general. I really, really think that, and Chinese medicine agrees with this, that stress is the first thing that makes something go imbalanced in your body that causes disease and further stress and different things like that. And I do use herbal medicine as well as my other modalities to help decrease stress on the body so the body can do what it needs to do and heal and just be happy and glorious. So I have a passion for herbs. I have ever since I was in grad school. I sat down with Anne like about a month ago, and we just geeked out. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to learn from you, Anne, even to increase my knowledge. We're going to be talking about a class that you're giving in the future. I am coming to that class. I'm so excited. But let's get started. So we're just going to talk about like the herbal basics. And let's actually just start with um, let's start with the difference between pharma and herbal,
Okay.
and how we approach both of those. So can you give us kind of how we look at that, Anne? Or how
Yeah, so there is confusion in the world, and it's understandable since we've been very pharmaceutically directed in our culture. So everything sort of in the way that we think of medicine as a modern culture, it's geared towards, which is not very well, it's recent medicine, which is pharmaceutical medicine, the synthesizing and the extracting of certain elements for very specific purposes. And so people tend to confuse herbal medicine with pharmaceutical medicine, and they're not the same. Pharmaceutical medicine does have its place, absolutely. There's emergency medicine, we need it, but that's what I kind of consider emergency medicine as opposed to long-term getting underneath it. Herbal medicine comes from a long history of healing people, so it gets underneath that. So herbs have multiple actions. It isn't like this herb is for this disease syndrome. And so I don't work with diagnoses. I mean, it's kind of helpful to see sort of where that categorizes, but in my world, and in Marie's too, I'm trained in traditional Chinese medicine, and the way we diagnose, we look at the big picture because we want to see what's going on in the individual.
Mhm.
So therefore herbal medicine has kind of become scary because pharmaceutical medicine can be very scary, and that's why it's prescribed and has to be watched over by doctors and stuff. So we get the two conflagrated, and it's not the same. So I'm always telling people, it's herbal medicine tends to be a little slower working. It needs, in acute situations, you have to take it frequently, not once or twice a day. There's huge differentiations, and that's why the side effects in herbal medicine are much less insane, because it is much more there's much more of a matrix in all of it, and it's much more convoluted, and we don't even know half of what's or more than half of what's in these plants that make them work so well. But they're not the dangerous thing that you think that you've been told to think, and that's why taking a deep dive into Google is going down the rabbit hole,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of misinformation because people compare if something's good for depression in pharmacy and then it's good for depression in herbs, then they must have the same side effects.
Yeah.
A lot of it's theory. A lot of it's theory. So you have to go to someone who knows what they're doing, so you don't have to be so fearful. And same thing with, when we talk about medicine for children and herbal medicine, all you have to do is lower the dose.
Yeah. For
It's
the
not like,
poundage.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not dangerous.
So I totally agree with that. I feel like when people I say like this many pills or scoops or teas or whatever, however I'm administrating these herbs to the patients, and they'll be like, that much? And I'm like, yeah, it's not as um consolidated, and it's not just an extract of one component. And so like pharmacological Western medicine is like one component, and when they'll they could study an herb and say like this part of this herb is what makes that happen. So
One active ingredient.
yeah, so example of that is like ephedra, and people were using that for weight loss, and it was causing a lot of trouble and a lot of like heart conditions and death and different things like that, so they took it off
Awful.
the market. And they actually took the herb off the market too, and it's a great Chinese herb for helping release the exterior and help you sweat and push out like a cold or flu or something like that. And so it's interesting that like because the extract of that herb was causing problems, the whole thing was taken off the market, and you have to go to like lengths to find ma huang, that's what it's called in Chinese
That
herb.
helps to know that.
Yeah. But and there's other herbs that can be used, but it was like that's one of the main herbs and formulas you learn in Chinese medicine and herbal medicine first. So understanding that and one component herb by itself is different than herbs put together in a group. Because there's a chief, and there's different parts of an herbal formula that there's the main driver, and then there's the supporting elements, and then there's like the little minions that we kind of look at herbal formulas as like little families that help. And the dosages of each of those herbs is really important. And when you're talking about pharma, you're talking about this is for headache, take this much, done. And you take once a day or maybe twice a day, but it's not anything that you're taking more often, and it's stronger acting, but it has more side effects than herbs do as well. And I always even tell people that with even homeopathic, I know we're not talking about
Gross.
homeopathic remedies, but if you're having something acute going on, like the stronger the dose isn't how much you're taking, but how often you're taking it. So herbal medicine and alternative medicine besides pharma is much different. So you really want to be with somebody that knows what they're doing, that's an herbalist. And kind of the Dr. Google, like you said, is not really a good way to go because it doesn't have a lot of the knowledge base of how to use these herbs. It's just kind of like little snippets of things that may be a component of that herb. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It's theoretical, a lot of it. There isn't really any real research behind it unless it's research that's driven by money for certain, you know, gains.
Yeah.
All
There you
research
go.
is not good
Yeah.
research.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you one study could make something seem so scary. It doesn't have to
On
be.
purpose, so you'll not do that. Yeah.
And there's
Or
even
make
yeah, go ahead.
or make it look bad,
Yeah.
like using crummy echinacea for a study to make echinacea look crummy and then give it to somebody once a day for like an acute cold and say, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It happened, like 25 years ago, and it was like, are you kidding me? All you have to do is look at it a little deeply and go, well, they didn't even know what they were purposefully making it look bad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also another note for Dr. Google when it comes to herbal medicine, I there's a formula that I prescribe to a lot of patients called Jiawei Xiaoyaosan, and it's good for so many things. But I think if you Google it, I had a patient one time, and they were younger, I think in their like 20s or 30s, and they Googled it, and they were like, "I'm not going to take that. It's for menopause." And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can use it for menopause, but herbal medicine is pattern based and it's not diagnosis based. So if you come
Right.
to me with infertility or high blood pressure or a cold, I'm not going to give you the infertility and high blood pressure and cold herbs. I'm going to
They
look at what pattern is
they don't
causing it.
exist.
Yeah, what's the root cause? So we're looking
Right.
at root causes. So sometimes, like what you said, you need pharma to do something acute if something's going on. Like I've used it in my life and it saved my life and it's great. But then the overall health and wellness of you and your family and your kids can really be majorly impacted by using these things day in, day out, by using things for immune purposes and dot, 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 all the
Right.
things. There's so many. I mean, this medicine has been in practice since the beginning of time.
Right.
People have been using herbs and plants and animal poop and bones and all the things that to heal. And it's great that we live in this time where we have both medicines and we can benefit from both of them and stay alive, sometimes using pharma long enough to use the herbs and vice versa.
Right.
If that makes sense. So Anne, go ahead and let's start talking about just what are your herbal basics that you just tell people to kind of dispel that fear they were talking about, that it's out there of like, oh, don't take this, don't take that, or don't do this, don't do that, especially when it comes to children. What are your basics that you start
Well,
talking
first of all, just common sense. I mean, there's nothing on the shelf of any store
about?
that's going to be dangerous.
Mhm.
Period. For grown, I mean, insofar as like poison.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, there are herbs that are toxic, and actually those can be very medicinal too, but you're never going to find them on this shelf.
yeah,
And the most important thing to know is just really in the marketplace, knowing who are the quality people, who are the people who are doing really good medicine because they're plants, right? So
mhm,
just like your broccoli or your mushrooms, you want to get them from a good source so you get all the nutrients and you get the good stuff. You
yeah,
want to make sure that they are accessing them properly, processing them properly, and are transparent in their medicinal values. So it's really just a matter of knowing where to go to get them. It's not really being afraid. There are companies, and when we're talking about children's medicine, that actually create medicine that specifically has children on the label, which is helpful for the parents or the caretakers who are a little uncomfortable, but really any herbs can be used for children. It's just in the right dosing.
yeah.
So,
I think it sometimes, especially when it's just in a store, when it says children and stuff like that, I think it's more for peace of mind for the
it is
parent
for peace of
to use
mind.
it. And if you just have some little knowledge about the ones that are maybe a little bit stronger and that you can dose properly, they're out there. And I use stuff that's for adults and not for kids.
Oh, always. I mean, if you
All
look at any herbal formula that's for children, all the herbs in there are going to be used for adults too. The
yeah,
only really big difference, oftentimes, well, it's always different, is the dosing. So a small body gets a smaller amount. It's not that a large amount would be dangerous, it's just a waste.
yeah,
Why give them a large amount? And same with elderly. As we get older, we don't need as much. As we're really little, we don't need as much. And in the middle is when we need different. So dosing, but good companies like Wish Garden, for instance, they will tell you on the bottle how to dose it. If these companies aren't specific, you can always find someone like me or Marie to help you figure it out. But really, honestly, it's not something to be afraid of.
yeah. So go ahead, let's go ahead and say a couple of the brands that are like on in stores that you really like.
Yeah.
That
So
you
I like Wish Garden, Wish Garden as in wishing, WISH, not witch, although that'd be kind of
that'd
interesting.
be awesome.
Yeah.
Let's make a brand together. Oh,
Yeah. So this is a brand that was created by a midwife years and years and years ago. So she really knows her stuff, and they've been around for a long time, and they're really good. Gaia, G A
hmm.
I G A I Gaia, Gaia, as in the
Yeah,
earth.
yeah.
Great brand, very transparent. Also, good
Mhm.
children's products.
Mm,
Herb Farm, PHARM. They're also quite good. So those are just three, and you can find them in any, Sprouts or Whole Foods or you know,
Yeah.
those places. So those are just three. There are other good ones too, but those are really solid and they've been around a long time.
I really like the planetary herbals.
And plant, well, yeah, Michael
I
Tier's
know that
a
you've
teacher.
studied specifically with
Yeah,
the man
yeah.
that started
I
that.
don't think he has a real strong children's line. I know he's got the loquat syrup and things like that, but I don't
That's
think
like,
he's,
I think 1 or 2, but
yeah.
honestly, I've been using these with my son.
Well, yeah. I mean,
For
you like we said, it doesn't have to say children. You just, you just learn how to down dose it. That's all for their size, and that's really easy.
Yeah.
Really easy.
So, for me, I love the Gaia. I love using their elderberry serum
Yep, it's delicious.
for
Very
kids.
good.
It's delicious. My son's like, "Ooh, can I have more of that?" I'm like,
Yep.
"Sure."
You can make your own elderberry syrup too. Very simple. If you go to Rosemary Gladstar on YouTube,
Mhm.
you can learn anything. You can learn, just go to the great people. Same thing with the, authors and herbalists. There's a lot of good ones on YouTube, and there's a lot of demos on
Yeah,
elderberry syrup. It's so simple to make.
so simple to make. But sometimes we are just not in a place where
Oh, I get it.
we have time. But like I love the planetary herbals and I love their loquat respiratory
Yeah,
serum for kiddos.
me too.
Loquat's an amazing herb. The fruit, the seed, and the leaf are amazing for clearing phlegm in the lungs. Um, that is a big thing when it comes to cough. And children get coughs so often
Yeah,
because their digestive systems aren't as strong as adults and they're still developing. So when they do eat a lot of damp inducing foods like dairy and sugar and gluten, and you know, all that stuff, basically that's what it is, peanut butter, um,
we
it
love it.
can produce a lot of damp and phlegm in their bodies and it can be held in the lungs. So when cold and flu season rolls around, then it's like all this extra damp and phlegm, and then it gets held in the lungs. And the difference between that and like a pharmacological approach, is that it's not depressing the cough, it's actually clearing the phlegm. So when you take these herbs, loquat respiratory serum from Planetary Herbals is my favorite for kids because it tastes good too. And then they
Yeah,
have like an adult version of Dr. Tierra's wild cherry bark serum with the echinacea. And I also do give that to my son in a very small dose because I like it that one too. But what it does is it clears the phlegm and it moves and it breaks the phlegm up. So after you take these things, your child might be coughing more, but more productive, and then it'll be gone.
yeah. And
So
I like to use the loquat to put, and I'll put echinacea in it for kids or OSHA or things like that that don't taste so great, and it disguises the flavor, and you got a double whammy there. It's perfect. I used to
yeah,
give it to my kids all the time.
yeah, and I mean it's amazing. And I've even had I'll tell them like get this for your kids and get the bigger one for you, and they're like, oh, we couldn't find the other one, but we did that one, and I took it and it was great. So it works all around. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, great stuff.
Um, there is, I do, so we talked a little bit when we got together about alcohol-based tinctures and glycerin-based tinctures. And from my experience and knowledge is that sometimes people have alcohol problems, so you don't want to give them that. But the glycerin is a good option. It does taste a little better because it's a little sweeter, the glycerin. But in my experience is that the alcohol-based ones have a stronger extract of the herbs
And longer shelf life.
and a longer shelf life. So go ahead and talk about that with giving that to
Sure.
kids. People being, oh, I'm gonna get my kid drunk and that's
No,
abuse.
no, 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 you're not. No, no. No, it's a very small, minute amount of alcohol in tinctures when you take them, very small. Everybody's body can metabolize it just fine. It's not an issue. Like she said, they're more effective extracts.
Mhm.
They're have a longer shelf life. And it's really good to get your kids, if you can, as early as possible, adapted to the idea of bitter taste, things like that, because then in life, they're going to be more prone towards their taste, their palate, even with food being better for them, because they're
Yeah,
not acclimated to sweet, which is what our culture does. Not that you shouldn't give your kids glycerites, they're very effective and healthy and all that stuff. It's
yeah,
fine. But if you can introduce them early to bitters in their life, they
and
will adapt,
sour.
and it will
Yeah,
help them with their diet and lifestyle too. So it's really effective. It's
yeah,
cheaper. It'll last longer. There's many ways. But
yeah,
again, and there are certain plants, no matter how much, you know, they will not break down really well in a glycerite. Some will, but not all medicines will. So yeah,
No.
it's not as effective, but
Yeah.
it's still good. And like all these companies we've talked, well, I don't think Herb Farm does some glycerites, but Wish Garden definitely does because they found that their clientele wanted them. So
Mm.
even though
Oh no.
they're glycerites, they are very effective. She knows, but again, it comes down to the earlier they start. My kids are very adapted to that stuff because we didn't really have glycerites back in the Stone Age.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
had to get, they had to take echinacea. Echinacea is like, whoa, and I would disguise it in loquat and things like that. But, but little by little, I'd pull out the other stuff. And now they're fully engaged in all of that. So
Yeah.
it does
And
work.
sometimes when you disguise stuff that doesn't taste so glorious, it just makes them not it's like, perfume over body odor. Sometimes you just need to take a shower. You can't just put more perfume. Like they're still going to taste certain herbs. I wasn't really necessarily educated in pediatric herbal stuff. I took some stuff, education about it, but I've just really been going from what I was educated in and like down dosing for their size, learning from other herbalists that do work a lot with children. So what I always had was granular herbs, which is just like a powdered form. There's no extra sugar or anything like that. And you just dissolve it in water and drink it. So I started giving my son herbs when he started eating. So around 6 months is when I started giving him herbs. And it started off with like some gentle formulas that weren't so gross and like bitter. But then sometimes like he was having really stinky poops at one point that was like post stomach bug, and the stinky poop just stayed forever. And I was like, oh my goodness. So what I did was let uh, let him start a little bit more neutral herbal wise, and then when he really needed the cold bitter da huang, which is like the root of a rhubarb that clears heat out the large intestine area, that he was able to take it. And kids are very smart. You say, listen, this is just for a little bit. I'll give you some raisins or chocolate or whatever it is afterwards, and they will listen. And if they see you doing the same thing, and then they see you not making funny faces and all that stuff, or if you say like, yeah, it doesn't taste so good, but take it. I had a patient, her husband was also an acupuncturist and herbalist, and so he was like, the baby's sick, let's give him this formula. And she was like, I don't know, and she was so worried about it because of the flavor of it. And I was like, well, what does your face look like when you're giving it to him? And she's like, oh yeah, it's like, and I'm like, okay, so babies pick up on that stuff. So until you're perfectly clear on okay giving that to baby, have your husband who has no qualms about the flavor and stuff to give it to the baby because it's a really good formula for what the baby has. And then understand that if you are going to go the more natural herbal route, you're going to have to do things that are a little bit less comfortable, like things that don't taste that well. And if you introduce them to kids early, then they'll be more used to them. And my son's a champ. Like he takes down herbs like no other. Does that mean he never complains about when they're gross and disgusting? No. I'll just be like, listen, you have a cough. You've been complaining about it. You haven't been sleeping well. This is what's going to help you, and you know it works. And he goes, okay. I'm like, okay, we'll do something that's like exciting afterwards that he can, like a reward. I'm not past bribing for that. Does that make sense to you?
Mhm. Yeah, but honestly, I mean, a lot of what people are going to find here in the West, I mean, because typically Chinese herbs aren't on the shelf in the stores,
True.
and Western herbs are kind of a little more milder tasting anyway. So I don't think it's as because honestly, I mean, that's a real big deal to give Chinese herbs to kids. I mean, early on it's fine because that's what the Chinese do, and they're all adapted to it. But a lot of the things that people are going to find here or use here are not going to be as intense either. So
Yeah,
there's
that's
that.
true. I'm a
And
little
not all kids, your kid is a champ, but some kids are more picky than others. So we have to do what works.
We have to do what works, and there's so many options. And you said like
Yeah.
Western, that's what's so beautiful about Western herbalism and what is on the shelves is it's not as intense as like me giving my son straight
No. No, so don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid, but
Ah,
know that it's possible. And like I said, if I had another kid, I'm sure they'd be exactly the opposite of my son, and maybe I would never be able to give him herbs.
right.
But starting him early is important, but don't beat yourselves up
No,
if
just
it's
do what works.
not good.
And because there are other options within the context of herbal medicine. And by the way, breastfeeding and taking herbs is a great way to give babies herbs.
Great way to give babies herbs. Yeah. Wonderful way. It is because I don't give any oral things to kiddos unless their gut is sealed and they're eating like at least some whole foods. So usually 6 months past. But yeah, doing it through breastfeeding through the moms, um, breast milk is glorious.
Yeah.
All right. Moving right along. We talked about trusted brands and starting early with kiddos, but don't stress out if they're not taking them because they're all
Yeah, there
so
are
many
other options.
options. Not all of us are straight Chinese herbalists. That's why Anne is such a great resource. She's been trained in like Chinese herbs and in Ayurvedic herbs and in Western herbs, and she can blend all of those really seamlessly. All right. What else did we want to talk about? I think that was about what we kind of wanted to cover, right, Anne?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, we talked pharma versus, are there any questions? There's so much information, but I don't know how much more time is this a half an hour today?
Yeah. I think,
Okay, yeah, then,
yeah.
yeah, we only got a
So,
minute.
and we can go a little bit longer if people have specific questions. You can go ahead and type them in the chat right now. But we will be talking about how you can dive deeper into this information. One thing that both Anne and I do have is Full Script. So Full Script is a more trusted herbal dispensary. Besides like doing Amazon, I would say going to Sprouts if you can find the herbs there is a great way to go. But when it comes to Amazon, usually the herbs and supplements they get are kind of they're not as high quality, and so I don't suggest that people do Amazon herbs
Oh,
because
no, I always tell my patients, no, no, no.
yeah,
Anywhere else is
people
better than
can
that.
change the label. You don't know what you're getting in there.
There's a lot of black market on Amazon when it comes to supplements, especially the professional lines. They're not supposed to be sold on there. And people, believe me, I know this. I've been dealing with this for years.
Oh, me too. So
Yeah.
full script, we each have a full script. So if you want to call and get uh a consult with either of us, and we can kind of give you access to our full script, and just so you have things that are good to have in your, like, what would you say are like the five main things that you would have on your shelf,
For
like
children,
for children?
particularly
Yeah.
families, echinacea, astragalus,
Mhm.
uh, elderberry.
Mhm.
I'd have to think about a little more because it's kind of hard for me. It's like choosing children.
Yeah,
But
ginger.
and then things like probiotics and things that are just generally supportive of health.
Yeah. Yeah. And gut health is like the key, especially for kiddos, but adults too. But like, we really need to understand that. So echinacea is a immune supporter, especially when you're already a little bit sick. Astragalus is as well, but really good for boosting the immune system before. So it's a good
And
thing to take in
and it's great
general.
for the gut too. It realigns the gut.
So good. And it helps, oh my gosh, it's like one of the
Blood
best.
building. Yeah, it's blah, blah, blah.
It
It's one of my favorites. It's always here.
calms the spirit. It's like I made a tincture that I was showing you, and I've been taking it with astragalus and licorice, which is another like harmonizing herb that
Yep.
helps all the herbs work together really
And all
well.
my
And
favorites.
reishi mushroom's a great one. It calms the spirit, nourishes your blood, boosts your immune system. It's amazing. So those are just kind of things that are really good to have around. But get on the horn with us, and we'll do consultations, and we can send you little things after talking to you on full script of what would be best for your family, and how just to always have on your shelf. And it looks like there's no questions. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next section. So Anne is actually, if this interested you and you want to really get in on what's going on and get more education specific stuff, Um, Anne is having a class on Sunday, June 2nd from 10:30 to 12. It's $50 a person, which is a steal. And she is going to be talking about, she's going to have a lot of handouts and resources. She's going to be talking about specifics on safety, how the herbs are used, the history of them, and like where you can avoid emergency rooms with your kids. That's huge because sometimes you do need to go with your kids and sometimes you don't need to. So that's really good to have. And then how to treat infants from 0 to 12 months and how to treat from 1 to 12 years. And she'll be talking about specific things like colds and ear infections and flu and broken bones and cuts. So this is like overall, you need to go. I'm going. I'm sure there's some things that I do know, but some things I don't even know. And I'm so excited to know this information. So I'm going to put in the chat what the link is for that class.
So it's a link that'll take you to my page, which will say work with me, and then you go and you scroll down and it has options for consults, but at the bottom of it is where the class is right there and you can sign up right there. And it can be in person, which is great, or Zoom if you can't make it in.
So this is like, this class is something every human needs to know. And every parent, whether you're new or old, I think is really important. And like I said, $50 for that, all that information is amazing. You're not going to regret it. And you're going to have this information and these resources for the rest of your life. And you can, feel a lot more calm and safe, empowered about your health and your family's health. I think that in the world right now, shifting to empowering you, taking care of your own health and wellness is so important. And it starts with kids. So that's why we're talking about like starting them early is important. But even if you have a picky tasting kid, it's okay. There's other options, and starting them early and understanding and having them be empowered with their health as well. Like this is a little side story. So kids, my son especially, can either tend to go constipated really easily or loose stool really easily. My son is the loose stool, phlegm systemically, and cough man. So every time he poops, I have him look at his poop and I say, how's your poop? Do we need herbs? And sometimes he's like, oh, mom, look, it's formed and glorious. Other times it's not so formed. And so we have a specific formula we give him to help him. And then he understands when he gets like coffee and phlegmy that we're not going to do sugar and gluten and cheese and different things like that. So getting your kids involved and not just like passive and like giving them something you don't understand, I think is also important.
Yeah.
Another thing is on June 23rd from 12 to 3 at Tourmaline Birth and Wellness Collective in PB, that's 4545 Faneuil Street. We're having a summer solstice event for the community, and I will be there with herbs, and I make herbal bone broth. That's really good for kids and immune systems, for pregnant mamas, for postpartum mamas, for everybody. And my son, who I know he's a champion, he could take all the things, but he tastes it and he goes, that's delicious, mommy. And when I'm drinking it, he always asks to drink it. So that's another thing that's good to have there. So I'm going to be there selling my herbal bone broth. I'll also have some tinctures available, and some loose leaf herbal satchels that you can make your own herbal bone broth, or just if you're a vegan or vegetarian, like quote unquote bone broth. I also make that as well. So that's where we're going to be. I put in the chat where you can contact Anne to go to that class. And how many people are you accepting in that class, Anne? Just however many?
Like my own my students who are like my mentees. So I'd
Hmm.
say probably 12 more public people, not regular students.
Okay. So there's only 12 spots available. I just took one. So 11 spots available. That's not that many. And she does this a couple times a year?
Yeah.
Okay. So she does this a couple times a year. So you don't have to stress out, but this is a really good time to get this information so that when we go, we
Into the
still have
fall.
some cold and flueness going on as the seasons change from spring to summer, and we've had a lot of rain and stuff. So that's going to affect our immune systems as well. So go ahead and follow that link. I'm going to send it on the follow-up email as well. So that's Sunday, June 2nd from 10:30 to 12,
Wow.
$50. The link is on the chat. And then on June 23rd from 12 to 3, I'll be at the Tourmaline Birth and Wellness Collective Summer Solstice event selling herbal bone broth, herbal tinctures, and herbal satchels of dry herbs that you can make your own stuff. So it was so glorious to have you, Anne. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
You've like awaken even more of the geeky nerdy herbalist inside me, and I love it. And I'm so excited to just continue working with you with our patients and learning from you as well.
And back at you.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye. Thanks. Hope to see you soon.